What's up, good people? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about my review of the Tedeschi Trucks Band featuring Trey Anastasio. And if I butcher Trey's last name, I apologize. Comment below if I do. It is what it is. But we're going to talk about the Tedeschi Trucks Band featuring Trey Anastasio from the Lockn Festival 2019, where they do Layla Revisited. So let's get into it. So, for those that don't know the history of the Layla album, let's talk about that first, because you really got to know the history of it before we get into what Derek Trucks, Susan Tedeschi, and company have done here. So, Eric Clapton. We all know Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton, in my opinion, is one of, if not the greatest living guitar players right now. But at this time in Clapton's career, late 65, 66, he had been in some high profile bands. Cream, he had been in Blind Faith, the Yardbirds. He'd already had a career of careers, so to say, to the point that people were referring to him as God. You know, there was the photo of the graffiti that said Clapton is God. All that hype, it is what it is. So, after the demise of Blind Faith, Eric had met some musicians, some other people, and he was kind of at a crossroads of his career, so to say. He had been in Cream. Cream was super popular. Blind Faith with Steve Winwood and Jack Bruce was also very popular. So he didn't really know what to do with his career. So his friend, who was in a little band called the Beatles, George Harrison, his wife, her name was Patty Boyd. And once he met her, he became completely obsessed with her. So he had a very strong affection and infatuation with Patty Boyd. And if you read his autobiography, it was borderline an unhealthy obsession, honestly. So he decides, hey, my career is kind of stalled. I'm going to hook up with a gentleman named Bobby Whitlock, and who was a drummer, and we're going to play some music. So him and Bobby starts writing songs. They meet up with a couple other guys, and they form a band called Derek and the Dominoes. This was in late 67 or so. So the name Derek and the Dominoes was, they had played around some clubs in England, and it was Eric and the Dynamos, and one club promoter mispronounced it and called it Derek and the Dominoes. And the way the story is, Clapton really dug into that because he didn't want to be out front. He didn't want the publicity that, hey, it's Eric Clapton and some guys. He wanted to be in a band setting. So they stuck with Derek and the Dominoes. So after they played a few small club gigs, they came to America, to Miami, to Criteria Studios. Now, Criteria Studios was built by a producer named Tom Dowd. Tom Dowd at the time was a cutting-edge producer and had built probably the best studio outside of Muscle Shoals, Alabama at Fame in the United States. Tom was working on the Allman Brothers album, Idlewild South. And the Allman Brothers had reached out and hired Tom Dowd just because he had worked with Eric Clapton in the past and some other artists that they were really into. So Duane Allman gets word that Eric Clapton is in town. And in August of 69, I think it was around the 25th, 26th, they were playing, the Allman Brothers were playing a benefit gig in Miami. So Tom Dowd in turn tells Eric Clapton, like, hey, you've got to go and see this band that I'm working with. They're the Allman Brothers Band. They do improv. They do whatever. So he talks Clapton and Bobby Whitlock into going. So they go to this benefit gig, and the way the story read in Clapton's autobiography, which if you haven't read, it came out 2010ish, I think it was. You really need to read it. It's a well written autobiography about Clapton's life. He did a really good job with it. But story is, Dwayne is on stage with the Allmans. They're in the middle of some of that funky jam that they're known for, and Dickie Betts spots Clapton in the audience, and then Dwayne spots him, and they take themselves to another level to show, hey, we can hang. So they meet after the gig, they go to Criteria and they jam. Now the jam was said to have been Butch Trucks from the Allmans, Greg Allman, and Dwayne and Dickie, and they all jam. So Clapton tells Dwayne, like, hey, I'm working on a set of songs for this album, and they're not really getting it. They're not really, I'm not really pleased with it. So Dwayne decides to join Derek and the Dominoes, per se, in the studio. And the body of work that they gave us was phenomenal. But when it was released, it got lukewarm reviews. And the source material really is Clapton pouring his heart out to Patty Boyd. If you go back and listen to this album, Layla, Have You Ever Loved a Woman, they all are an homage, a pleading with her to please leave George Harrison, who was in the Beatles, by the way, if you don't know who that is. Please leave George Harrison and come with me. After I learned that and I went back and listened to Layla and other assorted love songs, you can hear it. You can hear the desperation in Clapton's voice. On the album, him and Dwayne trade guitar parts. Of course, Layla is considered Clapton's best work. The song Layla is considered Clapton's best work. The coda there at the end with Dwayne Allman's slide, plus the piano, plus Clapton's solo, is probably one of the best pieces of music written in the modern era. Now, they only played 2 shows together with that lineup with Dwayne. And then Clapton begged Dwayne to go on tour with Derek and the Dominoes, keep the band together, because he and Dwayne had formed this really tight friendship over the months that they had recorded Layla. Dwayne obviously said he would not leave his brother. So he didn't want to leave the Allman Brothers. That was his brainchild. That was where his energy was focused. So it didn't happen. Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs was released November of 1970. Like I said, it got kind of lukewarm reviews. It did take a while for the album to gain the recognition that it has today. And unfortunately, Dwayne Allman would pass away in October of 71 from a motorcycle accident. He was only 24 years old, just a few days shy of being 25. So Eric Clapton never got a chance to play the songs with Dwayne Allman the way that they were meant to on a full-scale tour. Now, fast forward decades, and a guy named Derek Trucks, who was in the Allman Brothers Band, Clapton meets him through another guitar player that's in the Clapton band, Doyle Bramhall II, and Doyle turns him on to Derek, who is a slide guitar phenomenon, really. He'd been playing live since he was 10 or 11, but if you hear the guy play slide guitar, and I know he probably hates this, and I kind of hate to say it myself, but he is kind of a Dwayne Allman reincarnated on slide guitar. So, anyways, for the 2006 Eric Clapton World Tour, he hires Derek Trucks. So, he's got the Dwayne Allman feel in this band. And Derek's influence on the band was Clapton toured with two drummers, bass player, keys, Doyle, Derek, and Eric on guitar. I saw that tour. It was the first time that he had done a lot of the Layla material. That tour, that show that I saw in Atlanta in October of '06 was one of, if not the top live concert I've ever seen. Clapton played a lot of material off of Layla and other assorted love songs and gave Derek Trucks the freedom to do the Dwayne stuff but interpret his own taste. The Layla that night was outstanding. It was one of the first times that Clapton had ever played it with the piano coda at the end. Usually he would just solo over it. They'd play a little piano and they'd be out. But this was the full 10 to 12 minute Layla like he intended it to be. And you can find video footage of it on YouTube of them doing it from that tour. So the significance for Derek Trucks, of course, Derek and the Dominoes. Supposedly he has said in interviews that he was named after the album. So fast forward to, I guess, from what I read in interviews, around 2018-19, they decide that they're playing the Lockn Festival, which is a big music festival, and they say, hey, why don't we play Layla? And I don't really know what gave them the idea. From listening to interviews with him and his wife, Susan Tedeschi, the idea just kind of came to them. They said, hey, let's play the Layla album from start to finish live. And they reached out to Trey Anastasio. Trey is in the band Fish, and he also has a really great solo career. And I'm going to be real with y'all, all right? I have not been a big Trey fan throughout the years until this release. Until this release. So, thinking in that aspect, I like Fish. For me, some of their stuff just didn't get it for me. So when I heard that they had picked up Trey for this, I thought, I don't know. I don't know if that's the right guy. I don't know. I'm such a jam band fan. I might have went with Jimmy Herring, or I might have went with Warren Haynes. But for whatever reason, they reached out to Trey. I'll have to dig into that and find out why. Derek, if you ever see this video, come on, man. Or Trey, reach out. Anyways, so this was released in 2021, July the 16th of 21. It runs 1 hour 37 minutes. It's 14 songs. 13 of the songs are live. Song 14 off of Layla and other assorted love songs is a song called Thorn Tree in the Garden. And they decided to cut that in a studio because if you listen to the original version, it is an acoustic thing. And Derek felt that after the crescendo of Layla being so epic that they did not want to break out the acoustics live and bring the excitement down. So let's talk band real quick for this. So the Tedeschi Trucks Band was formed in late 15, 16. They roll with two drummers, a bass, a keys, Derek and Susan on guitar. They have backup singers for this. There is a horn section, and then they have Trey. And also on this, Doyle Bramhall II, which I had mentioned was in Eric Clapton's band and is still currently in Eric Clapton's band. He does make an appearance also. So vocally you have Susan, you have Trey, you have Doyle Bramhall II, and you have Mike Madison, who was, he's a backup singer for Tedeschi Trucks currently, but he was the main singer for the Derek Trucks Band. So if you haven't listened to the Derek Trucks Band, some of that previous material, I highly recommend that. And then, of course, dig into some Fish for Trey to get some of that. So for gear, of course, the videos that I watched, it looks like there's some super reverbs. I didn't notice Derek's Alessandro amps on stage. I noticed some supers, but Derek's really simple. It's an SG, a cable, and an amp. For Trey's always used real clean Fender Deluxe amps. I don't hear his signature like boomerang effect. I think there's a little chorus, a little tremolo, but that may be coming off the amp, a little vibrato, but nothing major. So Susan, same way. Supers with a Telly and a Les Paul. I think for this I saw her use a Les Paul in the videos that I've seen of this live setting. So for gear, that looks to be what they use. Very basic, not not really high wattage Marshall-y stuff. The Clapton version with Dwayne, I know Clapton, the secret to that tone was he was using a Fender Champ. A lot of people think that he used Deluxes or Supers or whatever, but from my research and from what I know, from what I read, Clapton used his Brown Strat that's on the back of the album, Brownie, into a Champ cranked up. So a Champ is a 5-watt little Fender amp. Looks like a shoebox. Dwayne used a gold top Les Paul with I think a Fender Twin. You can hear his more dirtier sound. I think he is using a Champ. At the time with the brothers, he was using 50-watt bass head Marshalls model 1986. Now the 86 doesn't mean the year, it's just a model number. But I think from what I've read and from my research, during the recording sessions of Layla and other assorted love songs, he was using a Twin. So back to 2019, they decided to do this at the Lockn Festival. It's a big festival, and here we go. So the set list follows the album tracking from start to finish. So they open with I Looked Away, and they close with Thorn Tree in the Garden. Now, me personally, the Layla album, to me, the material is great. Like I said, it's some of Clapton's signature stuff, some of his best work. But I've always felt underwhelmed by the recording of it. The recording to me was always very sterile, which is kind of a Tom Dowd thing. Tom Dowd was a master of live recordings. If you listen to Live at the Fillmore East by the Allman Brothers, if you listen to One More from the Road by Leonard Skinner, that's some of his signature live album stuff. Those sound great to me. They sound alive. They sound vivid. They have great mixes. But the studio stuff, I've never been that hip on his studio stuff. And I don't know why. It's just really sterile to me. He had a great ear. Mixing and all that, he was really ahead of his time. But if you listen to, say, the best two examples I can give you or three, is like Out a While South by the Allmans, this, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, and the Leonard Skinner album, Give Me Back My Bullets. Now, if you listen to Skinner's previous albums, they sound more alive. They sound full. Give Me Back My Bullets, to me, the band was in turmoil with drugs and drinking and all that, and that's the topic for another time. But the album is super sterile to me. So I've always had that with the Layla album, even with the remasters. I've always felt that it needed something. I always felt that I needed it to feel more alive. Now, that's just me. That's just me personally. Musically, like I said, I love the material. It's just the sound of it. Listen to the album, you can kind of get what I'm talking about. So with this release, Layla Revisited by the Tedeschi Trucks Band with Trey Anastasio, man, this is what I feel like Eric and Derek or Eric and Dwayne were actually going for. I feel like when you listen to these songs, they didn't strictly go off the source material and say, okay, we're going to play Layla and other assorted love songs note for note. It's going to be the same track time. We're going to do exactly what they do. You know, Trey, you have to play all the Eric solos like he played them. I'm going to do the Dwayne stuff, and it's going to be note for note. They did not do that, and I'm so thankful and love that they didn't. So if you read it, or not read it, if you listen to it, say they stretch it out. There's a lot of improv in here that makes the album feel alive. And I'm really thankful that they didn't follow the source material note for note. So, let's talk, like I've been doing or going to do in these videos, what I feel are the top 3 tracks that if I say, hey, you need to go listen to Layla Revisited, and this is where you start. So, for me, number 3 is going to be Keep On Growing, the 3rd song in the set. Keep On Growing runs about 12 minutes. And this is where I feel like this band is really hitting their stride on this set. The intro is loose. They lock in the tempo. Derek and Trey are dancing around with each other, and it's off to the races. Susan's vocals are great in this, and it's just a monster. It is a monster track. So number 3 on this for me is Keep On Growing. Next, I have to say Any Day. And usually I try to stay away from the popular tracks on albums and give you a taste of the deep cuts. But for this, I can't. The intro to Any Day that they do, this is the 6th song in the set, and it runs almost 13 and a half minutes. Again, they're really loose and free with the intro here, and Derek's playing some slide. Trey's kind of dancing with what Derek's doing, playing off of that, and then they lock in the tempo and they're off to the races again. Like, this is what I feel like Dwayne and Eric would have done live if they'd had the opportunity to tour and do this, or if Dwayne was still with us and they decided, like, hey, on an anniversary tour of the album release, let's go out on the road and play it. That's not to say that they may not have, but it's what I feel like they would have done. Again, the intro is great. They dance around the intro. Like I said, that's my number 2 track off of this. So number 1's hard to say. Of course, you would suspect that I would say Layla, but when you hear Layla on this, you're going to be floored. It is the jewel of the album, but like I said, I like to kind of give people something to dig into. So for me, it's going to be Have You Ever Loved a Woman? And the reason I say it's Have You Ever Loved a Woman is that Doyle Bramhall II comes out. This is a blues jam. It runs about 8 minutes, 21 seconds. And, I mean, the original version, you can hear Clapton pleading with Patty Boyd, like, have you ever loved a woman? Susan's vocals on this is great, and each guitar player takes a turn. Doyle's on stage with them at this point, Doyle Bramhall II. So there you go. That's my top 3. So number 3 being Keep On Growing, number 2 being Any Day, and then what I feel, other than Layla, what I feel is the track to hear is going to be Have You Ever Loved a Woman, which is the 10th track on the album, and like I said, it runs about 8 minutes. So there you go. I've said a lot about it, but my overall impression of this album, when I first heard it, I was absolutely floored. it did give me a new respect for Trey Anastasio, and I'm just late to the game on that. Like I said, Fish for me has not really been a band that I've really dug into. I've listened to a lot of Fish. When Trey did the Grateful Dead Fare Thee Well shows, the 6 shows for their farewell, I really personally didn't feel he was the right guy for that. In that community, a lot of people felt the same way. He played as good as he could in that situation to be put in those shoes. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't get on the Trey wagon. I'm sorry. But now I am a fan. Usually when bands do something like this, I don't really feel like they should take it out on the road, but if anybody from Tedeschi Trucks or anybody hears this that gets close to them, they need to tour with this, and everybody needs to experience this live. It just floored me. I can't say enough about it. So on my jam scale, as I always do, it's 5 jams out of 5. Even if you're not a fan of this genre of music, there is something here for you. You will enjoy this album. So there we go. Tedeschi Trucks Band featuring Trey Anastasio live from the Lockn Festival. Layla Revisited. Give it a listen and enjoy it. See you next time.